This week on Jerusalem Dateline, we're up on the Golan Heights along Israel's border with Syria, where Israel is troubled by the ceasefire deal. And passions inflamed over Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Plus, a report from America's last frontier, Alaska, and how it's becoming a home for refugees. And a look at how Israeli doctors are saving lives in Africa, plus a heartwarming visit to Jerusalem's Western Wall. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from the Golan Heights along Israel's border with Syria. The Syrian civil war has raged for 6 years and devastated the country. But now Israel is concerned about a ceasefire that presents a dangerous situation to the Jewish state. But first, let's take a look at the latest in the controversy over Jerusalem's Temple Mount. With chants of "with spirit and blood, we will redeem you, Al-Aqsa," thousands of Muslims prayed in and around Jerusalem's old city. Security measures today are tight. The only ones allowed to pray in the Temple Mount are men over 50 or women of all ages. Everyone else has to pray behind these barricades. Passions were inflamed last week after 3 Israeli Arabs exited the Temple Mount with guns and killed 2 Israeli policemen. Then they ran back to the Temple Mount compound and were killed by Israeli police.
That is a situation that we will not put up with. That is a situation where security has to be tight and shut down in these areas, and that is why throughout the week we've had a heightened security in order to prevent a further terrorist attack from taking place.
Jordan's King Abdullah initially condemned the attack, but the Jordanian parliament later praised it and prayed for the souls of the terrorists. Israel resisted international pressure to remove metal detectors at the Muslim entrance that it installed after the attack. The Waqf Muslim authorities called for the closure of all mosques and for Muslims to flood to the Temple Mount for Friday prayers. In comparison, anyone entering the Jewish Western Wall must pass through metal detectors and much more rigorous security. 3,000 policemen and additional soldiers were called in to secure Jerusalem, the old city, and the Temple Mount. From the controversy in Jerusalem over the Temple Mount, we come back here to the dangers Israel faces on its northern border. The ceasefire agreement was announced during the recent G20 summit when U.S. President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump discussed the agreement just days after the ceasefire in this exclusive interview with CBN founder Pat Robertson.
Well, look, we had a good meeting. I think we had an excellent meeting. One thing we did is we have a ceasefire in a major part of Syria where there was tremendous bedlam and tremendous killing. And by the way, this is now 4 days. The ceasefire is held for 4 days. Those ceasefires haven't held at all. That's because President Putin and President Trump made the deal, and it's held. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe as we're speaking, they start shooting again. But this has held, unlike all of the other ceasefires that didn't mean anything. So that was a great thing that came out of that meeting.
I'm standing on the Golan Heights, and behind me you can see the Israeli-Syrian border. All of the area behind me is covered by the ceasefire agreement. But according to reports, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't share President Trump's optimism about the ceasefire agreement, and the main reason? Iran. When Netanyahu met recently with French President Emmanuel Macron, Israeli media reported the Prime Minister expressed deep disappointment with the ceasefire agreement. One senior Israeli official told the Israeli daily Haaretz the agreement, as it is now, is very bad. It doesn't take almost any of Israel's security interests, and it creates a disturbing reality in southern Syria. The agreement doesn't include a single explicit word about Iran, Hezbollah, or the Shiite militias in Syria. They also quoted Netanyahu as warning Macron Hezbollah's military buildup inside Lebanon poses a clear and present danger. I told him the seeds are being sown here for a very serious conflict between Israel and Lebanon, and the Lebanese government shouldn't take steps that would push such a conflict forward. That's why some are warning the next phase of the Syrian civil war might be the most dangerous of all. When Palestinian terrorists attack or kill Israelis, they and their families can receive what's called martyrs' payments from the Palestinian Authority. Some people call it pay for slay. The U.S. Senate just came one step closer to defunding the Palestinian Authority until they stop making those payments. Abigail Robertson has that story.
It's bad enough for a parent to hear about the death of a child. It's even worse to learn the person who killed him was praised and rewarded by a government largely funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. That happened to the parents of American student Taylor Force when a 21-year-old Palestinian man murdered Taylor while he was visiting Israel.
No society should reward their children for being terrorists.
U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham hopes to pressure the Palestinian Authority to stop their martyr payment policy by proposing a bill that would cut the almost $400 million in U.S. funding to the group.
We have a duty to defend our citizens and not empower people who will kill them.
Graham thinks there is no hope for a two-state solution in the Middle East if the Palestinian Authority continues to reward people for being terrorists. According to the Jerusalem Post, the PA argues the bonuses only benefit legitimate combatants, but the Israeli and U.S. governments say this is immoral.
Abbas said the following, the president of the Palestinian Authority: I will leave office before I stop martyr payments and before I stop paying money to prisoners. How do you do peace with a government who would actually take money and pay their children to kill other people's children?
The Senate committee reviewing the bill mostly agree this needs to end, but worry about unintended consequences to Israel's security if all funding is cut off. Many want to see changes added to ensure humanitarian aid is not affected and that this would not lead to the collapse of the PA.
We're going to keep that aid flowing with one condition. The Secretary of State has to certify that the Palestinian government is changing their behavior. If he can't do that, we'll cut that money off.
Graham says he's confident that after revisions are made to the bill, the Senate will see a vote on it this year with overwhelming support. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Every year, the largest Christian Zionist group in the world meets in Washington, D.C. It's called Christians United for Israel. And as Eric Rosales reports, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence delivered the keynote address.
President Donald Trump and I will stand with Israel always. Of that you may be assured.
Vice President Mike Pence promised a crowd of more than 5,000 at the Christians United for Israel summit that the U.S. Embassy in Israel will be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
It is not a question of if, it is only when.
That's welcome news to founder Pastor John Hagee and a CUFI membership of more than 3.5 million. Hagee brought the crowd to its feet when he boldly said Israel is not an occupied territory.
The Palestinians have no claim to Jerusalem. It belongs to the Jewish people.
Many of those in attendance say it's not just about being politically correct, it's about being right with God and defending Israel. Many say that this summit allows them to be educated, to be able to go back home and defend Israel.
Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's working toward the unity, and the scripture tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
CBN's own Emily Jones highlighted the anti-Semitism taking place against Jews on college campuses.
What is so disgusting is what was once reviled as blatant anti-Semitism is now called the new social justice movement, except this time there are no safe spaces for Jews.
The vice president ended his speech by quoting Jeremiah 29:11 and then told the crowd that the best days of Israel are yet to come. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, from the Middle East to America's last frontier.
Certainly a very different view from what people would think they would find in Anchorage, Alaska.
Millions of refugees have fled from the Middle East. While more and more countries are closing their doors to these refugees, America's last frontier wants the world to know its doors are open. Caitlin Burke brings us this story from Anchorage, Alaska.
They flee persecution, poverty, and war. willing to live in dangerous refugee camps or cross oceans in overcrowded boats.
The government implemented the ethnic cleansing policy and then forcefully displaced that population out of the country.
The latest Global Trends report from the UN notes that in 2015 alone, violence drove some 65 million people from their homes. That's more than the entire population of France.
Instead of developing better asylum systems that are hospitable, that recognize the hardship and the difficulties and the reasons for people to flee, barriers are erected. And the barriers need not be physical. Sometimes they are legislative barriers.
Grandi recently reported that the space needed to provide these people homes far outweighs the amount made available by governments. When people only hear or consider statistics, it becomes easier to ignore a crisis. But behind these numbers are people and families, torn from their lives, their homes, and driven into exile.
Here in Anchorage, Alaska, the city is working on new policies to help integrate the immigrants and refugees who resettle here.
You can walk through any store, down any street, and not know how many different languages you just heard. It's a continual intercultural arena here, and for us that has given us certainly a very different view from what people would think they would find in Anchorage, Alaska.
In 2016, the city won a grant to promote inclusiveness for immigrants and refugees.
We really want to help try and figure out who we've got and how do we start working with businesses, with government, with the university to make sure that we're really giving them that opportunity to succeed.
As part of that strategy, the Anchorage Community Land Trust is focused on revitalizing Mountain View, one of the country's most diverse neighborhoods.
We have people from literally every corner of the earth in this one little small footprint. Every day it's this little experiment of people coming together to call this one place home.
In its efforts to transform Mountain View, the Land Trust asks a lot of questions. It then takes action based on what it learns from residents.
Mountain View was always seen as a last resort community. And we saw that in resident tenure. So people would stay on average 0 to 2 years. Since revitalization has been taking place, people are staying longer. The average tenure now is 2 to 5 years.
Catholic Social Services is among the groups helping refugees succeed after they've relocated.
Over the past 5 years, we have resettled a little over 700 refugees here in Anchorage.
Lisa Aquino told us about specific challenges that refugees face when they finally find a place to start a new life.
On average, a refugee that's resettling in the United States has been displaced from their home for, I think, 17 years. So imagine that. I mean, they haven't been able to have a home where they could live, where they could safely send their child to school, where they could have a job and save money for a very long time before they've come here.
CSS then works with refugees on making the transition to Alaska by helping with language, job skills, and surviving the harsh climate. Hari Coughley resettled here in 2009. He quickly learned English and found a job, determined to be successful in his new home.
Refugees work very hard. They are very dependable person. Once they get the job, they will keep the job. And they have very strong determination that I have to do something. I have to, to come up the, from the bottom level.
Going forward, Anchorage will continue to explore what makes its city a place for people to come, stay, and succeed. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Anchorage, Alaska.
Up next, a look at one of our favorite stories, Save a Child's Heart.
It's the locals who are doing with the supervision from the Israel team.
The relationship between Israel and African nations is getting stronger and stronger. Just a couple of weeks ago, a team from Save a Child's Heart performed life-saving surgeries in Ethiopia. A similar team went to Tanzania last year, and CBN's Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl was there.
Dar es Salaam is the largest city in the East African country of Tanzania. This is the Cardiac Institute at the Muhimbili Hospital in Dar es Salaam. Tanzania has 50 million people, yet it's the only place in the entire country that performs heart surgeries. Last year, the Jakaya Kikwete Cardiac Institute saw 25,000 patients and performed 270 surgeries. That's not nearly enough. Help is needed, and the Israeli organization Save a Child's Heart is answering the call by partnering with the Muhimbili Hospital. At the Wolfson Medical Center, doctors give their time to save a child's heart. Over the years, they've saved the lives of more than 4,000 babies and children from Africa, South America, Asia, and the Middle East. And there's more.
For us, just bringing children to Israel, it's nice, it's important, but it's not as good as treating them here at home.
Cardiologist Dr. Sagi Asa is one of 35 doctors and other staff who brought their talent and care to Dar es Salaam for a week-long mission.
For the healing process of a child, it is as important as the surgery itself. To be in your environment, treated by your physicians, speaking your language.
They performed 12 surgeries, 21 other procedures, and screened 125 children for heart issues. That number included 7-month-old Whitney. She needed surgery to separate the blood vessels to her heart. CBN News received a rare opportunity to document the surgery performed by the team of Israeli and Tanzanian doctors.
And if not treated at the first year of life, that might be irreversible. And this patient would grow up and die miserably at the age of about 20 or so.
Whitney's mom, Lydia Ahilanai, said she knew her daughter's case was uncommon.
I was very scared, and then I asked, have you ever did an operation like that to the other kids apart from this? They said no. But at Israel, we used to do it. So they are going to be successful.
And that means that she would be able to live like a normal life expectancy, have children, be like a normal child.
But the work of Save a Child's Heart doesn't stop there.
It's not the volume which counts here, it's that capacity building. And that's why you see the operations are complicated, but it's the locals who are doing with the supervision from the Israel team.
Professor Mohammed Janabi, director of the Cardiac Institute, knows it's an uphill task.
Because these operations, by our own, nobody could have tried to touch those kids.
Having him coming here, and for the first time, we did it together here, so that, well, I'm hoping that the next case I'll be able to do it by myself.
Dr. Godwin Godfrey trained in Israel for 5 years. That helped prepare him for a busy schedule when he returned to Tanzania.
I'm the only one who specializes in pediatric cardiac surgery department, but I have some help from other cardiac surgeons who specialize like in adults and vascular.
Head surgeon of Save a Child's Heart, Dr. Lior Sasson, mentored Godfrey.
I'm very proud because now he assisted me, but in many other cases he did it by himself.
What we're looking at is the fruits and the results of a long training program in Israel, where Israeli doctors have been training their colleagues from Tanzania.
Save a Child's Heart Executive Director Simon Fisher said there's been a dramatic improvement in the complexity of the cases that Godfrey can handle. Missions like this, he said, bring the Tanzanian team closer to becoming independent.
Until a year ago, Tanzanian children in need of heart surgery could not be treated inland. The only opportunities were through surgery either in India or in Israel.
This partnership is also giving both Israel and Tanzania an opportunity to take on negative perceptions.
If you go out today and interview people, what do you know about Israel? Say, oh, they are the people who are shooting the Palestinians. No, they are in Muhimbili trying to do operations. If you interview 10 people today, trust me, maybe one will believe your story.
And it's the same thing that many people come to Africa. They don't think if they'll find cars, roads, and everything. They always think about they'll find people starving and living in the jungles and what. So it's really about the image that is portrayed.
Randy Weiss recruits volunteers and spends a lot of time keeping the children happy. She hopes the good work done here and other places will help get the word out, not only about this organization, but Israel as well.
There's so much negativity associated with Israel, and especially any kind of news that comes out of Israel, and people tend to ignore all these wonderful things.
Missions like these can help tip the scales.
But I can guarantee you that their image of Israel changed after their child or their children received surgery.
Such was the case for this Muslim dad.
I love Israel because he rescued my son's life. Give me 5. Yes, he's so good.
And that says it all. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Coming up, watch this heartwarming story of the handicapped making their first visit to the Western Wall. Each day, thousands of people go to the Western Wall to pray, but for the handicapped, it can be difficult to place their hand on the wall or put a prayer in its cracks. Recently, an organization called Shekel gave some disabled Israelis the opportunity of a lifetime.
The kotel is often considered a basic cultural right of every Israeli. Very rare to see a group like this at the kotel, just like everybody else, is something very extraordinary.
It was absolutely amazing, and it's just something that they never get to do, and it was just so special to be able to be here with my patients.
Thanks for joining us, and to all our other viewers around the world. That's it for this edition from the windy Golan Heights. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.